I think it cut off whatever we were doing that last time, but we're back to Paddington Bear in the garden. And what we had already read is that Paddington Bear, we had just started. One morning, Paddington took some paper and started to make a list of all the nice things he could think of about being a bear and living with the Browns. To start with, he had a room of his own and a warm bed to sleep in. We know about that right now with these two little cats making the bed even nicer and warmer. And he had marmalade for breakfast every morning. In darkest Peru, he had only been allowed it on Sundays. The list grew longer and longer, and he had nearly run out of paper before he realized he had left out one of the nicest things of all. The garden. Look at this before I read the page, but I just wanted to show you on this page. We went by it a little too quickly, but I wanted you to see the pretty fountain with the bird in it drinking water, and the birds up here, and the flowers. Paddington liked the Browns' garden. Apart from the occasional noise from a nearby building site, it was so quiet and peaceful it didn't seem like being in London at all. But nice gardens don't just happen. They usually require a lot of hard work, and the one at number 32 Windsor Gardens was no exception. Mr. Brown had to mow the lawn twice a week, and Mrs. Brown was kept busy weeding the flower beds. There was always something to do. Even Mrs. Bird lent a hand whenever she had a spare moment. It was Mrs. Bird who first suggested giving Jonathan, Judy, and Paddington each a piece of the garden. "It will keep certain bears out of mischief," she said meaningly, "and it'll help you both at the same time." Mr. Brown agreed it was a very good idea, and he measured out 3 plots at the far end of the lawn. Paddington was most excited. "I don't suppose there are many bears who have their own garden," he exclaimed. Beautiful. I love the way the paintings go over onto the next page. I love books. Oh my goodness, they just make such a variety of beautiful things. Hey, look at the little turtle. There's a little turtle right down there, right by the tree. I think that's a turtle. And there's a little cat's tail bouncing around. Early the next morning, all 3 set to work. Judy decided to make a flower bed, and Jonathan had his eye on some old paving stones. But Paddington didn't know what to do. In the past, he had often found that gardening was much harder work than it looked, especially when you only had paws as opposed to hands like we have, which have fingers that move with more agility and, as they call it, opposable thumbs. Can let you do a lot picking up, as you know, because I watch you doing so much more with your hands every day. You can grab things, you can pick up things, you can shovel, you can weed, you can do a lot. You can plant little tiny seeds. In the end, armed with a jar of Mrs. Bird's homemade marmalade, he borrowed Mr. Brown's wheelbarrow and set off to look for ideas. Here are the pictures for this page. They're starting their gardens, but Paddington doesn't know what to do with his. So he takes a jar of marmalade and he sets off to get ideas. I like looking at other gardens to get ideas too. I love it. I don't always find ones as pretty as mine. Sometimes they just grow grass, which is a bit boring. His first stop was a booth in the market, and there he bought a book called How to Plan Your Garden by Lionel Trugg. The book came complete with a large packet of assorted seeds, and if the picture on the front cover was anything to go by, gardening must be very relaxing. Mr. Trugg seemed to do most of his planning while lying in a hammock. By the end of the book, without lifting a finger, he was surrounded by blooms of every possible size and color. Paddington decided it was a very good value indeed, especially when the owner of the booth gave him 2 pence change. So here he is at the market, and he buys the book. He's reading it. Comes with packets of seeds, but it may not be very realistic about the work that's involved in planting a garden and growing a garden. As you know, it takes a lot of work. It's quite hot and sweaty and challenging. But it's fun looking at the market at the other things people are buying and doing. The pigeons, the kids. Mr. Trugg. Mr. Trugg's book was full of useful hints and tips, and Paddington couldn't wait to try some of them out. The very first tip suggested that before starting work, it was a good idea to close your eyes and try to picture what the garden would look like when it was finished. Having walked into a lamp post by mistake, Paddington decided to read another page or two, and there he found a much better idea. Mr. Trugg advised standing back and looking at the site from a safe distance, preferably somewhere high up. He knew just the spot. There he is with his wheelbarrow. What's he doing there? Oh, he ran into the lamppost, and he didn't just bump his head. Everything sort of fell out of the wheelbarrow. Now he's going to a high spot to look at and visualize what his garden is going to look like. I love these drawings so much. The painting's so beautiful. Oh, they get better and better. By the time Paddington reached the building site near the Browns' house, it was the middle of the morning and the men were all at their tea break. Placing his jar of marmalade on a wooden platform for safekeeping, he sat on a pile of bricks for a rest while he considered the matter. There was no one around, and there was a ladder nearby. Oh dear. So here's the work site. Here's a scaffold. Here's a ladder. Here are bricks. Here's Paddington. Here's concrete and tools. Mr. Trugg was quite right. The Browns' garden did look very different from high up. This little munchie is loving this reading time. She's just loving it. See what I mean? That's her paw. These are her front paws, her back paw. Can you see her little head under my arm? And Maisie's right nearby in an equally comfortable position. This little munchie. I love this little munchie girl. You're munchie girl. You're my munchie girl. Yeah, you're my munchie girl. Yes, you're my munchie girl. Mr. Trugg was quite right. The Browns' garden did look very different from high up. Judy was digging away at her patch of ground, and not far away Jonathan was trying to break a paving stone in two. Just then Paddington heard the sound of an engine starting, and standing well back in case Mrs. Bird saw him, he peered through a gap in the boards. As he did so, his eye nearly popped out. On the ground just below him, a man was emptying a load of concrete on the very spot where he had left his jar of marmalade. Dear. Paddington scrambled back down the ladder as fast as his legs would carry him, reaching the bottom just as the foreman. Oh, I have to start this again. Just as the foreman came around the corner. Is anything wrong? Asked the man. You look upset. My jar's been buried, exclaimed Paddington hotly, pointing to the pile of concrete. It had some of Mrs. Bird's best golden chunks in it, too. The foreman called his men together. There's a young bear gentleman here who lost some very valuable chunks, he said urgently. Better get cracking. I won't ask how your jar got there, he said, turning to Paddington as the men set to work clearing the concrete into small piles, or what you were doing up on the ladder. I'm glad of that, said Paddington, politely raising his hat. Suddenly there was a whirring sound from somewhere overhead, and to Paddington's surprise, the platform landed at his feet. My marmalade, he exclaimed thankfully. Your marmalade? Repeated the foreman, staring at the jar. Did you say marmalade? That's right, said Paddington. I put it there ready for my 11s. It must have been taken up by mistake. Now the top's come off. Oh dear. It's spilling all over everything. It was the foreman's turn to look as though he could hardly believe his eyes. That's special quick-drying cement, he wailed. It's probably rock hard already, ruined by a bear's marmalade. No one will give me 2 pence for it now. I will, said Paddington eagerly. I've had an idea. Well, this is interesting. What's he going to do with concrete that has marmalade in it? Do you have any idea, little Isaac? Do you have any idea, little Munchie, little Maisie? I don't want to ask Malcolm or Gabby because they're down on the porch. It took Paddington several trips to take all the lumps of concrete home in the wheelbarrow, and it kept him busy for most of the week. When the builders saw the rock garden he had made, they were most impressed, and the foreman even gave Paddington some plants to finish it off until his seeds started to grow. It's National Garden Day on Saturday, he said. There are some very famous people judging it. I'll spread the word around. You never know your luck. It does look beautiful. The foreman was as good as his word, and on Saturday half the neighborhood turned up at number 32 Windsor Garden to see the judges arrive. Paddington nearly fell over backward in surprise when he discovered that no less a person than Mr. Lionel Trugg himself was leading the procession. "It's very good of you to get out of your hammock, Mr. Trugg," he exclaimed. Not at all," said Lionel Trugg. "My pleasure, I must say. I love your orange stones. Where did you find them?" "I didn't," said Paddington. "I think they found me, thanks to the builders." "Congratulations," said Mr. Trugg, as he handed Paddington a gold star. "It's good to see a young bear taking up gardening. I hope you will be the first of many." And to show how pleased he was, he gave both Jonathan and Judy a silver medal so they would not feel left out. "Who would have believed it?" said Mr. Brown, as the last of the crowd departed. "You must write and tell Aunt Lucy all about it," said Mrs. Bird. "They'll be very excited in the home for retired bears when they hear the news." Paddington thought that was a good idea, but he had something to do first. He wanted to add one more important item to his list of all the nice things there were about being a bear and living with the Brownses. Browns, not Brownses, with the Browns, having my own rock garden. Then he signed his name and added his pencil paw print, his special paw print, just to show it was genuine. The end. That is a very nice book, and that is a very cute picture, and that is a very beautiful picture too. These were wonderful drawings. That was a great book, and I think we have a very relaxed kitten here who has been thoroughly enjoying this book, as you can see. Well, I think I'm going to need to stretch out this leg because it's a little bit getting a crink in it. But before we go, let's do what Paddington did and think about a few of the things that are great about being a little boy named Isaac in the house with the Jamesons and your mom and your dad and two dogs. Two dogs, that's one of the things on the list. Two cats, that's another. Oh, no, don't get up, Munchie. And Maplewood. Wait a second, and you get to take a walk to see what's going on here. Oh, don't go, Munchie. Please don't go. She's curling up by my feet. I guess she's more comfortable there. Anyway, we had a splendid book, splendid time. I'm going to sign off, and we'll read more soon, no doubt. I love you, little guy. Bye-bye.